Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. She was the mother of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but her story has not been told enough. So who was Amina? From which family did she come? What kind of childhood and youth did she live? How did she meet Abdullah, the father of our Prophet? And why did destiny separate them on the road to Medina? In this video, you will not only watch Mother Amina's story, but also the known life of Father Abdullah, and the journey from which he never returned. And one day, a 6-year-old child standing alone at his mother's grave. Now, we are telling this forgotten story, gathered from Islamic sources in all its aspects. This is not only the story of a mother, it is the starting point of an ummah. You are watching Religious Story TV. We continue our Ramadan series, where you will learn more about our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and write in the comments which country you are watching from. If you are ready, let's begin. About 550 years after Isa alayhi salam, the world was still in darkness. We are in Mecca. No voice of a prophet had risen to the sky, and no light of revelation had come down to the earth. Humanity was inside a deep darkness, and they were no longer even surprised by it. The name of Allah had disappeared from people's lips so long ago that most people did not even remember him anymore. People were making gods with their own hands. From clay they shaped. From stones they carved with their own knives. Then they knelt before them and begged. They asked healing from eyes that could not see. They expected mercy from ears that could not hear. And our story begins in this darkness, because the greatest lights are born from the deepest darkness. There was a man in this city. His name was Wahb. He was from the sons of Zura, from a noble family. His wife's name was Bara, and they had no children. One night, Wahb saw a dream. A garden full of flowers, an old man with white hair, Hur with faces bright like the moon, a bouquet of roses. Wahb smelled the rose, and its scent gave him a sweetness he had never tasted in this world. In the morning, Bara said she saw the same dream. They went to a fortune teller. The old man held his beard, thought deeply, and stayed silent for a long time. Then he said, "O Wahb, a child will be born to you, and this child will be so great in honor and glory that he will overshadow everyone." Shortly after this news, his wife became pregnant. Days passed. Mecca was still the same. The sun was burning, drunk people were lying in the streets. But in Wahb's house, there was excitement. Guests had come, and a feast was prepared. While Wahb was sitting in the garden with the guests, his mind was always inside the house. Bara was in labor. Then a cry, "You have a child!" Wahb jumped up like an arrow. He ran inside, and there, wrapped in white and green silk, was a smiling baby. She was smiling at birth. Wahb took the tiny baby in his arms. He kissed the forehead of that child full of nur. The baby was like a fairy thrown from the horizon of Jannah into the garden of the world. A great feast was given to the people of Mecca. Slaves were freed. Celebrations continued until evening, and Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet, stood up. At that time he was around 50 years old, and he spoke to the crowd. "O people, I name Wahb's daughter Amina, like a seed of nur planted inside an age of darkness." And years would pass. The child would grow. She would love, marry, wait, cry, and be patient. And one day, she would carry the greatest secret of the universe in her womb. But first, she had to grow. Time does not stop, and it would never stop. The baby who smiled at her birth had grown into a young woman. Her beauty began to be spoken about everywhere. But her beauty was not only on her face. What made her different was the depth in her eyes. In Mecca, girls were often looked down on or raised only to prepare for marriage. But Amina was raised differently. Her father spoke with her, asked her opinion, and listened to her. This was unusual for that time. At the same time, in another house in Mecca, destiny was being written. Abdul Muttalib, the respected leader of Quraysh. His son, Abdullah, was one of the most handsome and well-mannered young men in Mecca. People spoke about the nur on his forehead. When young women saw him from far away, their hearts would tremble. But Abdullah was not an ordinary man. He came from a pure lineage, a chain untouched by zina. He was clean, he was dignified. He did not go near haram. His father Abdul Muttalib was known as the man who rediscovered Zamzam. The story was like this. Years earlier, Abdul Muttalib had fallen asleep in the place near the Kaaba called Hikr. That night, in his dream, a voice came to him, "O Abdul Muttalib, dig Tayyiba." He woke up. There was no one there. What was Tayyiba? The next night again. "Dig Bara." He woke up again. What was Bara? The third night. "Dig Muzamama." On the fourth night, the voice was clear. "Dig Zamzam." "O blessed man, what is Zamzam?" This time the answer came, "It is water that never ends, and its bottom cannot be reached. It will provide water for the pilgrims. It is between the place where the blood of sacrifices is spilled and the ants' nest." As soon as morning came, Abdul Muttalib began to dig. Only his son Harith was with him. The leaders of Quraysh opposed him and tried to stop him, but Abdul Muttalib did not give up. As the digging continued, a shine appeared in the soil. Water, clear, flowing, sweet water, Zamzam, the blessed water that Ibrahim alayhis salam had left in the desert, that our mother Hajar had found with her feet, and that had been hidden under the earth for centuries, had come back to the surface again. That day, Abdul Muttalib cried. But Abdul Muttalib also had a vow, and that vow carried a burden heavier than joy. At that time, he was alone. Only his son Harith was with him. His people were pressuring him and looking down on him. In that loneliness, Abdul Muttalib had prayed to Allah, "My Lord, give me 10 sons. If you give them to me, I will sacrifice one of them for you." Years passed. Allah had heard that prayer because Allah always hears. 10 sons were born, each one stronger than the other, each one braver than the other. In Mecca, no one could stand against Abdul Muttalib anymore because 10 lions were standing behind him, but the weight of his promise had become unbearable. He remembered that night. In his dream, a powerful voice said, "O Abdul Muttalib, fulfill your vow." He sacrificed a ram. "This is not enough." He sacrificed a cow. "This is not enough." He sacrificed a camel. "Something greater." "What is greater than this?" "One of your sons." In the garden, all 10 of his sons stood in a line. Under the moonlight of the night, under the shadows of the palm trees, each of them was like a lion. Their father had called them, and they came. Abdul Muttalib looked at them. He looked for a long time. The youngest and most beautiful among them was Abdullah. His smile warmed the hearts of people. On his forehead was that nur, always that nur. It was like a light that never left him. "My sons," said Abdul Muttalib. His voice was shaking. "Long ago I made a promise to Allah. If I had 10 sons, I would sacrifice one of them. Now that time has come." No one complained. No one objected. "You are our father. We accept your decision. Do what you wish." Then Abdul Muttalib said, "Each of you take an arrow, write your name on it. 10 arrows, 10 names." They went inside the Kaaba. The lot was drawn. Abdullah. Abdul Muttalib's hands trembled. He drew again. Abdullah. 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time. Every time it was Abdullah. Abdullah did not object. He had no complaint and no fear. He turned to his father and said, "Then do not delay. I have always been among those who obey your decision." He opened his arms and embraced his father. Abdul Muttalib held him so tightly, as if he would never let him go. The news spread across Mecca. Abdullah would be sacrificed. The leaders of Quraysh stopped Abdul Muttalib. "No, if you sacrifice your son, tomorrow we will all sacrifice our sons. This will become a tradition, and we will not be able to stop it. Find another way." They went to a fortune teller in Khaybar. The old man thought deeply and then said, "Draw lots between Abdullah and camels. Start with 10 camels. If the lot does not fall on the camels, add 10 more. Continue until the lot falls on the camels." So they began. 10 camels, 20 camels. The lot still fell on Abdullah. They continued until it reached 100 camels. After 100, the lot finally fell on the camels, and so Abdullah was saved. Abdullah had passed that great test and reached the age of marriage. His father, Abdul Muttalib, had already found a wife for him. One day there was a knock at the door. When Wahb opened it, he saw Abdul Muttalib standing there. This was not an ordinary visit. The words were short and clear. He asked if it was possible for Abdullah and Amina to marry. Wahb remembered the dream he had seen the night before. "Oh, Abdul Muttalib, last night I saw a dream. Let me tell you." And he told him, "I saw our great ancestor Ibrahim in my dream. He said to me, 'I have performed the nikah of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, and your daughter Amina. You also accept it. I know that this marriage is a blessed destiny in the sight of Allah." Abdul Muttalib's eyes filled with tears, because he had seen the same dream, and that was why he was standing in this house. Allahu Akbar. At that moment the lock of destiny was opened, but no one knew yet. This marriage would not only unite two people, it would change the history of humanity. When the day of the nikah came closer, there was a small movement in Mecca. This was not an ordinary marriage, because Abdullah was not an ordinary young man, and Amina, she was known as one of the most noble, modest, and pure young women in Mecca. The nikah was performed. There were speeches in the house, smiles, mouths making dua. Abdul Muttalib, Wahb, Bara, all of them felt a joy that could not be described, because this was not only the joy of marriage. Inside them, there was a feeling of a great event that they could not name. A short time after this marriage, Amina became pregnant. She was now carrying a great secret. But Mecca did not know this. Mecca was still full of idols. Mecca was still turning inside oppression. And inside the doors of Amina's house, a silent miracle was growing. At night, when Amina lay in her bed, what she felt was not like an ordinary pregnancy. Some nights she could not sleep. Her heart trembled and beat fast. It was as if an unseen hand was telling her, "Prepare." Because this child would not be an ordinary child. When he was born, the palaces of Kisra would shake, fires would be extinguished, idols would fall, the world would tremble, but those days had not come yet. For now, we only know this. Destiny had entered the house of Amina. Mornings in Mecca are sometimes heavy. That morning was like that. The sun had risen, but there was a shadow in Amina's heart. The life growing inside her was becoming more clear each day. But at that time, news reached Abdullah. A trade caravan was preparing to travel toward Sham. Trade was like blood flowing in the veins of Mecca. Men would stay on the roads for months. This was normal, but some separations are not normal. Abdullah had to leave. Amina stood at the door. She looked into Abdullah's eyes. This was not an ordinary goodbye between husband and wife. It felt like something inside her was breaking. "It will not take long," said Abdullah. "I will make dua," said Amina. She held his hand. She did not want to let it go. But sometimes destiny forces a person's fingers to open. The caravan left. As the cloud of dust disappeared on the horizon, a tight feeling began in Amina's chest. She placed her hand on her stomach. Days of worry were beginning. Days passed, then weeks, then months. When news came that the caravans were returning to Mecca, the city became active, the streets filled. There were eyes waiting at every door. Amina was waiting too. Her heart was beating fast. Abdul Muttalib was searching for his son in the crowd. "Have you seen Abdullah?" No one gave a clear answer. Then whispers began. Abdullah had fallen ill. He had stayed near Medina with his uncles. Abdul Muttalib's face became hard. His eyes became still. He immediately called his eldest son, Harith. "Go, find your brother." That night, Amina could not sleep. She felt the movements of the baby inside her, but her soul felt like it was beside Abdullah. She wanted to be there. She wanted to hold his hand, but destiny had built an invisible wall in front of her. Days passed. Then one day there was a knock on the door. The sound of that knock was not ordinary. When Amina heard it, her heart felt like it would stop. She opened the door. The eyes were looking down. "Abdullah has passed away." For a moment, the world became silent. Sounds became distant. Her vision darkened. The father of her unborn child was no more. Amina leaned against the wall. She placed her hand on her stomach again. The life inside her was still there, but the life outside had suddenly become less. When Abdul Muttalib received the news, he lowered his head. "My son," was all he could say. The shoulders of that strong man fell. Abdullah had been buried in Medina, and so the master of the worlds had become an orphan before he was even born. This was not an ordinary death. This was the finest line of destiny, because one day that child would be known as the father of orphans. But he had not even been born yet. That night, Amina was alone. When she put her head on the pillow, her tears flowed quietly. She thought about Abdullah's face. She thought about his smile. She thought about their last goodbye. But a person never says goodbye knowing it is the last time. At some point in the night, she fell asleep from exhaustion and she saw a dream, a voice, calm but strong. "Oh, Amina, you are carrying the best of the worlds, and do not tell anyone about this." Amina suddenly woke up. Her heart was beating fast. In that moment, her fear disappeared. Peace came down. She had lost her husband, but she was not alone. The child in her womb was not an ordinary child. After that night, Amina's eyes changed. There was pain, but there was no fear, because now she knew this child would not be only her son. This child would tear apart the darkness. But first, he would be born, and that birth would shake the world. Nights in Mecca are quiet, but there are some nights when even the silence waits. That night was like that. Amina's pains had started. The sky was clearer than usual. The stars seemed closer to the earth. Even the sound of the wind was different, not strong, not soft, as if it was waiting. Amina was not alone. There were women beside her, but inside her heart there was a loneliness that no one could enter. Her husband Abdullah was not there. With every pain, she felt his absence again. But at the same time, a peace she could not describe filled her heart. The voice from her dream was still in her ears. "You are carrying the best of the worlds." The pains became stronger. For a moment, she closed her eyes. What she saw in that moment, she would never forget in her life. It was as if the walls of the house became wider, the room grew bigger. A veil was lifted from her sight. She saw a light spreading toward distant lands, toward Sham, a nur reaching far away, beings moving in the sky, like the descent of angels. At the same time, outside Mecca, other things were happening. In Persia, in the palace of Kisra, there was a shaking. Some towers that had stood for years collapsed. A fire that had burned for 1,000 years suddenly went out. The lake of Tabariya dried up. The idols inside the Kaaba fell on their faces. The world was passing a turning point without knowing it, and at that moment, a baby was born. But this birth was not ordinary. When the baby was born, he did not cry. He smiled. The women looked at each other. "What kind of child is this?" Amina took her baby in her arms. She saw him for the first time. Her heart trembled. She was now the mother of an orphan, but at the same time, she was the woman carrying the greatest trust of humanity. At that time, Abdul Muttalib was at the Kaaba. He was spending the night in dua. Suddenly, news came. Amina has given birth. He ran. Even at his age, he was fast like a deer. He entered the house. When he entered the room, he saw Amina. In her arms was a baby wrapped in white cloth. "Give me my grandson so I may kiss him." He took the baby in his arms. He kissed him. Then he kissed him again. And at that moment, he felt a nur enter his heart. He was shaken. There was something different about this child. When the seventh day came, a great feast was given in Mecca. Camels were sacrificed. Sheep were distributed. Poems were recited. Everyone was curious. What will his name be? Abdul Muttalib stood up. "I have named him Muhammad." Everyone was surprised. "This name is not among your ancestors. I want him to be praised in the heavens by Al-Haq and on the earth by the people." Muhammad, praised, chosen, honored, but he was still in the cradle. That night, a Jewish scholar walked through the streets of Mecca shouting, "The star of Ahmad has risen." No one fully understood what he meant, but he understood. There was a mark on the child's back, the seal of Nubuwah. And those who saw that seal understood that one age had ended and another age had begun. Amina, however, was only looking at her baby with a mother's heart. She nursed him. She held him close. In every look, there was both joy and sadness, because she knew her son would grow up without a father. But she also felt this. This child would not live an ordinary destiny. That night the heavens had rejoiced, but the earth was not yet aware of it. The age of darkness was sleeping, unaware of the rising sun, and that sun was still in the cradle. The morning in Mecca was no longer the same after that birth. With the first light of dawn, Amina looked at her son. Tiny hands, a peaceful face, deep calmness. As she watched him, she felt something. This child did not seem like he was trying to get used to the world. It was as if he already knew it. A mother's heart understands some things without being told. While she was nursing him, her eyes filled with tears. "I wish your father could see you." These words echoed inside her heart. Abdul Muttalib took his grandson and brought him to the Kaaba. This was not an ordinary visit. He held him in his arms. He looked at him for a long time. No one knew what was passing through his heart, but that day he did not treat him like an ordinary grandson. It was as if he felt what would happen in the future. Because in Mecca, some rumors had started to come from distant lands. When this child was born, the idols fell. In Persia, the palace shook. A fire that burned for 1,000 years went out. People were talking, but no one dared to say anything openly, because the birth of a child shaking an empire was not something the mind could easily accept. But destiny is not limited by the mind. For Amina, life had turned into a different struggle. She was now a widow, a young woman who had lost her husband, and the mother of an orphan. Meccan society stood on the shoulders of strong men. It was not easy to be a widow, but Amina was not weak. There was sadness in her eyes, but her head was not lowered. When she looked at her son, she found strength. At night, when she held him close to her chest, the pain inside her became a little lighter. One night, while putting her baby to sleep, she watched him. "You will grow up without a father." She whispered these words, but right after that, she felt something. The things that seemed like a loss in this child's life were perhaps divine wisdom. because one day that child would gently touch the heads of orphans. He would live as an orphan, understand them, and comfort them. Maybe growing up without a father was to soften his heart. And of course, not having someone to rely on as a father would bring him closer to Allah. Days passed. After some time, according to the tradition of that period, the matter of giving the child to a wet nurse in the desert was discussed. The air of Mecca was heavy. To make babies healthier, they were sent to a wet nurse in a place with clean air. At the same time, they would learn Arabic in its purest dialect there. Wet nurses would come to Mecca, take the children, and bring them to their tribes. That day, the wet nurses came. Each of them wanted to take the child of a rich family because they would receive financial support. When it came to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, orphan, that word changed their choices immediately. He had no father. That meant there was no payment guarantee. Many wet nurses passed by him without even looking. Amina saw this. For a moment her heart hurt, but she did not show it on her face. In the end, a woman among them, who was in the most difficult situation, Halima bint Abi Zuaib, came close to him. Halima's camels were weak. Her animals were not giving milk. Her caravan was the slowest. She also had not found a child from a rich family. Finally, she said, "At least let me take this orphan." At that moment, no one knew that this decision would open the doors of Barakah. Halima took Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam into her arms. At that moment, something changed. Her camel became stronger. Her milk increased. During the journey, they began to move at the front. Barakah was following them step by step. They traveled toward the desert. Amina stood at the door. Once again, she was facing separation. First, she had said goodbye to her husband. Now to her son, her arms were empty, but her eyes were strong. She raised her hand. She made dua. "O Allah, protect him." And the desert embraced an orphan child. But this desert was not carrying an ordinary child. This child was a sun that would break the darkness. No one knew yet, but the heavens knew. When the wet nurse Halima took little Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in her arms and started the journey to her tribe, it was as if the wind changed direction. Her camel suddenly became faster. The animals that were behind before moved to the front. At first, Halima could not understand it, but soon she realized this child was not ordinary. When they reached the tribe, the Barakah was clear. Animals that had not given milk before began to give milk. In the dry land, there was a feeling of relief. Halima's husband was surprised. Something changed with this child. Halima stayed silent. She no longer called him orphan. Every time she held him, she felt a peace in her heart that she could not describe. As she watched him grow, she felt more and more amazed. Sometimes at night, she would look at his face while he was sleeping, and a feeling would pass through her heart. There is a secret in this child. In Mecca, time was moving slowly for Amina. The house was quiet. Her arms were empty. She was thinking about her son. What was he doing far away? Was he cold? Was he hungry? Was he crying? A mother's mind never rests when her child is far from her. But Amina also had trust inside her, the voice from that dream, that peace. It was as if an unseen protection was around her son. Years passed quickly. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was close to 4 years old. The desert had become like his home. But one day, the first great extraordinary event of his life happened. That day, he was playing with other children. The sky was clear. The wind was light. Suddenly, 2 beings in white clothes appeared. The children froze in fear. They laid Muhammad on the ground. They opened his chest. They took something from his heart. They cleaned it, and they put it back. The other children ran to Halima in fear. They killed him. Halima's heart almost stopped. She ran quickly. She saw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His face was pale, but he was calm. Halima trembled. At that moment, she understood again that this child was not ordinary, and she became afraid, because a secret always attracts attention. She was afraid that harm might come to him, so she decided she would take him back to his mother. When Amina saw Halima at the door, her heart beat fast. She took her son into her arms. She held him tightly. She could not stop her tears. Muhammad looked at his mother, as if he knew everything. At that moment, one longing ended. But the journey of destiny continued. Amina now had her son with her. She protected him carefully, but inside her a feeling told her that time was short. One day, she decided to take her son to Medina, to visit the grave of Abdullah, to see his uncles, to face the past. This journey was not ordinary. A mother and her orphan son were walking again on the desert roads, but on this journey another separation was waiting for them. They did not know yet, but destiny was counting their steps. The roads to Medina are long, sand, sun, and silence. In that city, a young man had once become ill and closed his eyes, Abdullah. And now, that man's son was walking with small steps toward that soil. Muhammad was only 6 years old. His eyes were deep. When they arrived in Medina, Amina took her son to the grave of Abdullah. Little Muhammad looked at the ground. He stayed silent for a while. At that moment, maybe for the first time in his life, he felt a deep emptiness. A child who would never be able to say the word father. That emptiness was written quietly in his heart. Amina knelt down. She touched the soil. Tears flowed from her eyes. She was strong, because her son was beside her. After the visit, they began the journey back to Mecca. The return journey was heavier than the arrival. Amina's face was pale. While they were in Medina, weakness had started. When they entered the desert, her fever rose. Their servant Ayman was with them, but the illness was getting worse. Little Muhammad sat next to his mother. He held her hand. That small hand held his mother's weakening fingers. The desert wind was blowing softly. The sky was very wide, but at that moment the world felt small. Amina looked at her son. In her eyes there was love and farewell. "My child." She paused. It was as if she wanted to say many things, but words were not enough. In the end, she only said, "May Allah protect you." And she closed her eyes. In a place called Abwa, in the middle of the desert, a young woman gave her last breath in front of her 6-year-old son. Muhammad looked at his mother's face. Maybe he thought she was sleeping, but the tears of Ayman were telling the truth. At that moment, a 6-year-old child became completely an orphan. He had never known his father. Now he had lost his mother too. The desert was silent, but it was a silence that entered deep into the heart. A child stood beside his mother. A wound came down into his heart. Amina was buried there, in the sands of Abwa, at a young age, leaving behind her greatest trust, only 6 years old. Ayman held little Muhammad's hand. They began the journey back to Mecca, but now his mother was not beside him. The road was long, and with every step, loneliness became heavier. When they reached Mecca, Abdul Muttalib saw his grandson. The expression on his face said everything. "My mother has died." Maybe these words were not spoken, but the eyes said everything. Abdul Muttalib took his grandson into his arms. He held him tightly. Tears flowed from the eyes of that strong man. "Now I am here." But the orphanhood written by destiny cannot be fully erased by someone's embrace. That child had now been broken twice, and that broken heart, one day, would become a healing for the hearts of all humanity. That night, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam slept alone, without his mother. His father was already gone, but the heavens were watching him, because that child was not an ordinary orphan. That child would become the leader of an ummah, closer than parents. 2 years passed. He was 8 years old. Abdul Muttalib had grown old. The lines on his face had become deeper. One day, he became ill. The leader of Quraysh was now lying in bed. The leaders of Mecca were visiting him, but his eyes were always searching for his grandson. Muhammad sat beside him. The grandfather's hand trembled as he held his grandson's hand. At that moment, there was a shadow on Abdul Muttalib's face. It was as if he knew, as if he felt destiny coming closer once again. He called his sons. He looked especially at Abu Talib. Take good care of him. These words were a final advice, and after a short time, Abdul Muttalib closed his eyes. An 8-year-old child was shaken for the 3rd time. First he had lost his father, then his mother, now his grandfather. How can a child's heart carry so much weight? But he carried it, because that heart was not ordinary. Abu Talib took him into his home. He did not separate him from his own children. He was a poor man, but he was generous. He loved Muhammad very much, and Muhammad always showed respect to his uncle. When there was little food in the house, he would offer it to others first. When he was shepherding sheep, he would protect the flock. When he saw injustice, he would quietly walk away. He was still a child, but he was a dignified child. While walking in the streets of Mecca, he saw other children bowing to idols. But he did not bow. He did not even ask questions. He only looked. It was as if a voice inside him was saying, "This is not right." As the years passed, one more thing became clear. There was no lie in this child. There was trust. There was loyalty to what was given to him. People gave him a title, Al-Amin. He was not yet a prophet. He had not yet received revelation. But people trusted him, an orphan child, but with a strong heart, a lonely child, but with unshakable honesty inside him. Destiny was preparing him step by step. Orphanhood had softened him. Loss had made him mature. Silence had given him depth. And now, he was walking toward the next stage of his life. But Mecca was still dark. The idols were still standing. Oppression was still ruling. And that child did not yet know that one day those idols would fall, that one day that darkness would be torn apart. But destiny was carrying him step by step toward that day. The streets of Mecca are hard, stone roads, burning sand, crowded markets, and at every corner, an idol. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was no longer a child. He was stepping into youth. But this youth was not ordinary. Other young men were chasing entertainment. They spent time in poetry gatherings, boasted about tribal pride, and sometimes acted wildly. He was different. He did not join night entertainment. He did not bow before idols. He did not take part in injustice. His uncle Abu Talib was poor. Life at home was not easy. Muhammad began to work at a young age. He herded sheep. He became a shepherd. The loneliness of the desert taught him how to think. While protecting the flock, he would look at the sky. He watched the red color of the sunset. At night, he looked at the stars and thought deeply. For a shepherd, the sky is wide. But his sky was not only wide, it was deep. One day he joined a trade caravan going toward Sham with his uncle. It was a long journey, the heat of the desert, the cold of the nights, the tiredness of the road. But he did not complain. When the caravan approached Busra, a monk noticed him. He looked at young Muhammad. He looked for a long time, as if he was searching for something. Then he turned to his uncle. "Who is this child?" "My nephew." "Is he the son of his father?" "His father has died." A serious expression appeared on the monk's face. "This child is not ordinary." These words placed fear inside Abu Talib's heart. Maybe that day, for the first time, a stranger clearly said how different this young man was. Abu Talib shortened the journey to protect him. They returned to Mecca, but destiny was still preparing him. In his youth, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was never wild. He never lied. He never harmed anyone. People began to trust him with their belongings because he was trustworthy. Al-Amin. This name became the summary of his character. There was no revelation yet. There was no prophethood yet. But there was good character. There was purity. There was honesty. It was as if the heavens were first preparing his heart. One day, a big dispute broke out in Mecca. The Kaaba was being rebuilt. Hajar al-Aswad was to be placed back. But which tribe would place it? Every tribe wanted this honor. The argument grew. Swords were almost drawn. Blood could have been spilled. Finally, they decided, let the first person who enters decide. At that moment, the one who entered was Muhammad. The crowd immediately felt relief. Al-Amin has come. They trusted him. Muhammad brought a cloth. He placed the stone in the middle of the cloth. Each tribal leader held one corner of the cloth. They lifted the stone together, and Muhammad placed it in its position with his own hands. No blood was spilled. The fight ended. He was not yet a prophet, but he had solved a crisis. He had not yet received revelation, but he had shown justice. At that time, there was a respected and wealthy woman in Mecca, Khadijah. She had trade caravans. She was looking for someone trustworthy. She had heard about Muhammad's honesty. She called him. She sent him to Sham for trade. Young Muhammad once again stood out with his honesty. The prophet increased. He did not lie. He did not cheat. Khadijah's servant Maysara told her what he had seen during the journey. This man is different, Khadijah thought deeply. There was dignity in this young man. There was purity. There was trust. And one day, Khadijah proposed marriage to Muhammad. This marriage was not ordinary. It was support. It was peace. It was shelter. Muhammad was 25 years old. Khadijah was 40 years old. But between them there was understanding, not age. With this marriage, Muhammad's life entered a new stage. He was no longer alone. He had a home. But at night, he still chose to be alone. He climbed Mount Hira. He sought refuge in silence. The darkness of Mecca disturbed him. Idols, oppression, injustice. His heart felt tight. In Hira, he would think for hours. He was searching for himself. Maybe he was searching for the answer. He did not know yet, but the time was coming closer. He was walking toward the age of 40, and the heavens were preparing to speak once again. Now let us remember what our mother Amina said to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam before her death. If what I saw in my dream is true, you will be sent by Allah as a prophet to tell people what is halal and what is haram. You will be sent to complete the way and the religion of your grandfather Ibrahim. Allah will protect you and keep you away from idols and idol worship that continued among nations. Everyone who lives will die. Everything new will become old. Everything is temporary, and I too will die. But my name will be remembered forever, because I have given birth to a pure son, and I leave behind someone who will remember me with goodness. These words were not only a mother's farewell, it was as if destiny was speaking through a mother's voice. It was as if the world held its breath at that moment, and the mother left. Her son was 6 years old. Years passed. Long, heavy, difficult years. Prophethood came, revelation came, battles came, victories came, but in the heart there was always the same corner, the same quiet, deep emptiness. When the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went for the Umrah of Hudaybiyah, he visited his mother's grave. He stopped. He looked. He looked at that soil. He straightened the soil of her grave with his own hands. It was as if his hands were saying, I am still here, mother. When he sat by her grave, tears flowed from his eyes. It was a quiet cry coming from deep inside, the tears of a prophet, the tears of a son. The companions who saw him could not hold themselves. They all cried together. That moment entered every heart that was there. One of them asked with a trembling voice, O Messenger of Allah, why are you crying? And his answer made every heart tight. My mother's mercy surrounded me. That is why I am crying. Think for a moment. He was never left alone in his life. The companions were always beside him. But being without a mother was different. It was not like any other pain. It was a silent, deep wound, felt even in a crowd, a corner of the heart that never fully healed. No heart can replace a mother. No kindness can replace a mother's kindness. He carried that orphanhood in his heart for his whole life. He grew up without a mother and without a father. Maybe that is why his mercy was so deep. Maybe that is why his eyes filled with tears so quickly. Maybe that is why he looked at people with such sincere love. Pain had made him someone who felt more deeply, and Allah never left him. As it was clearly stated, "Your Lord has not left you, nor has he become displeased with you." And today we are here, without seeing him, without hearing his voice, without looking at his face, but feeling the trace of that same mercy in our hearts. 1400 years later, in different lands and different times, all praise and thanks belong to Allah, who made us love him so much. Even today, we do not leave him alone. Let us not leave him alone. Salat and salam be upon him. He has met his family. He has met his Lord. But our longing still continues, and this longing is the purest form of love. O Allah, in this Ramadan, our prayer is that you unite us with our Prophet. We want to see him with our own eyes and drink from his hands at Kawthar. Unite us with him, O Allah. We want more people to hear the story of our mother Amina. Let every heart that hears it share in this love. By liking the video, sharing it, and writing your feelings in the comments, you can be part of this message. Because his story deserves to reach every heart that beats with love for the Messenger of Allah. She was a great mother. Like Maryam, like Asiya, like Khadijah, she was among the chosen women. A very special servant chosen to bring into this world the final prophet sent as mercy to the worlds. May Allah never remove this story from our lives. May it always live in our hearts. Ameen. We will continue this series. Please subscribe to the channel now so you do not miss the upcoming videos. We ask for your du'as as we are going through difficult days. We especially need your prayers so that these videos can continue. See you in the next video. May Allah be pleased with you all.